Welcome back to Exploration Arcanum. My name is Jason. In this interview, author, teacher, and podcast host Lee Harrington joins me to discuss how kink and magic intersect. Drawing on decades of experience in both the occult and BDSM communities, Harrington unpacks the history, language, and cultural context behind sacred kink, while offering practical guidance for newcomers interested in integrating sexuality and kink into their practice. I especially enjoyed this conversation because Lee challenged not only common assumptions about kink and sex in magical work, but also some of my own preconceived ideas. I want to thank Lee for joining the show, and I've included links to his work in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and subscribe for more esoteric conversations. Thank you.
Lee Harrington, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely delighted to get to be here. And I've been really enjoying recently diving in to reading an array of books on everything from sexuality to examining tarot. And I don't know about you, but there's something so rich in this winter season about getting to dive into literature and spending energy going inward so that we can go outward as we move forward.
Nice.
What about you? How are you doing?
I'm great. California, it's good enough for me to say we're going to be into some rainy weather for the foreseeable future. We just, we just got done with some rainy weather. Now we're doing rainy weather part 2, and part 3 is coming next week. So it's all great.
I love it. Growing up in Seattle, my bones understand what you speak of.
All I can say is it's going to make for great snowboarding weather. I'm just going to say
Nice. Nice.
But no, thank you so much for taking the time. It's over your left shoulder. We're here to talk about your book, Sacred Kink. The original publishing was in 2010, and the second edition came out in 2016, which if most people, like I did, downloaded it off of Amazon, that's the version that we're getting. So before we get into the book, give us a little bit about your backstory. How did you first get involved in the occult and the BDSM community? How did that all come together?
I'm very blessed to be multi-generational. Grandmother was somebody who could trace her, past lives back at least 1,000 years. My mother was a crystal healer. And at 13, even though I'd been exposed to stuff before then, my mother handed me my first tarot deck, which was Tarot of the Cat People, which has some, cultural, challenges, shall we say, looking at it nowadays. It triggered a piece in me that had me then dive into being part of CUPS, the Covenant for Unitarian Universalist Pagans, and being involved with them, getting to wonderfully being based in the Seattle area. So we had resources like Beyond the Edge, not Beyond the Edge Cafe, that's the first kink venue I ever went to, but Edge of the Circle Books, which is still open in the Seattle area. Robert is an amazing resource and just human being in general. And then being someone who, as I was referencing earlier, loves digging my teeth into information, whether it's from the hearts and minds of others or whether it's through literature. Being someone who absorbs it, I feel so blessed to, again, have been in the United States in the 90s as someone getting to explore these topics.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I've actually been listening or into your content for a very long time. And one of the ways that I discovered your work was through the Dan and Dawn podcast that they had years ago. And then, of course, you post on different websites, like you post on FetLife and different websites like that. And it was just this very deep understanding of not only metaphysics, but people in general that I felt that you have. So when you first decided to, okay, I'm going to, instead of just exploring this stuff for myself, I'm going to start teaching other people about it. When did you decide to make that transition, and how did that initially work out for you?
So when I was in England finishing up my university degree for folks who don't know, I'm transgender. I was assigned female at birth, and I was a big-titted chica, right? Like I had a body that was something that when I had been exploring with individuals with my sexuality and my kink, I had somebody say, hey, we're looking for somebody to be in a video. Would you be interested? And I said, you know what? I am a college student. The answer is yes. Because, like, if you had the body, why not do it? Right? I wasn't a little girl, but that was a bonus at times too. And so I shot stuff. And when I came back to the States, I was working as a database administrator as a day job. And yet I was like, oh, how about I make some extra money on the side doing this stuff? Within 2 years, I had people saying, hey, that thing you did in a video, could you show us? Right? Could you show us how to do the thing? And I'm just like, you pay for dinner, sure. Right? Like I was just willing to roll with it. And within like about a year into that stuff, it was like, hey, you're in New York shooting videos. Would you be game to do some stuff with us here at Tess in New York? And I'm like, sure, absolutely. Because a lot of what I believe in strongly, whether it is in studying the occult, studying magic, whether it is exploring our sexuality, it's great to read books. It's delicious to go to classes with 30 of your other friends in a room or total strangers. And there is something deeply powerful in someone side by side with you, not just the dyadic of like top, bottom, or, an initiate to explorer, right? But the side by side peer based education and exploration, right? Like me teaching rope to someone else who is wanting to learn rope, me bottoming to rope with somebody else who's learning to bottom to rope, me teaching somebody how to cast a circle while they are doing the work side by side, not me as the expert showing a thing. But the power of peer-based education is invaluable. And even though I do this stuff full time and do stuff for either small groups or huge audiences, it still in my skin comes back to the idea of what is it like if we are side by side showing each other the power of the ride, if nothing else for the language of it, right?
Right. But what we're describing though, in essence, is sex magic. Would you agree with
Yes
that?
and no. I want to hear your theory on that. Like, how did you get to that answer? Because then I can pivot off that. Because I've got 13 different ideas in my head when you say that.
Right. Well, because when I first started reading the book, it basically, the way I took it was that this was okay. We all have the basics of sex magic. You're with a partner. You're alone. Either you're basically raising energy.
Mm,
And so what this to me would seem like as a more, I don't want to throw the word extreme out there, but more powerful way of creating that energy using different techniques like bondage, like ropes, like things like that, that the average person may not associate with sex magic because most people just think it's about getting off after a certain amount of chanting. Whereas this seems to be a little bit more involved as far as techniques and tools.
well, I appreciate how you break that down because the piece that I hear on there that I completely concur with is the power of raising energy, right? The power of raising energy. Because if we're doing magic, what is the battery that is fueling the work, capital W work that we are doing, right? What is, to think of Lupa as an author and teacher, what is the intention plus attention that leads to magic? Right? Or exploring the work of the Tantrika Luna in California. What is intention plus attention times aligned action? Right? You can't just jerk off hoping that you're going to be able to get a new job and then not put any job applications in, right? Like set up the universe for the opportunity to actually deliver, right? Like that's, pray, but actually hoe.
Well,
And
as they say, faith without works is dead.
right. And so thinking about what is the tool we are using to actually deliver that attention, right? What is the tool we are using to be able to deliver and build that potential, to build that charge in the battery, right? To build the charge in the battery to be able to fuel the work that we're doing. Sex magic is such a broad topic. The challenge, though, is the word sex, because there's a picture in the mind of so many people of what sex looks like. I remember an ex of mine having a conversation between the two of us, and we were talking about sexual interactions. And I said, well, I had sex with so-and-so, but they said, but they didn't put their penis in either of your holes, so how is that sex? And I paused and I went, do you think lesbians don't have sex? Like, ever? Because penis into vagina, penis into anus, penis into mouth, if it requires external genitalia for sex to have even taken place, what does that say about a patriarchal lens?
Okay.
The idea that sex is this one thing. Now we expand it to the notion of the erotic, the notion of being able to tap into our senses, to tap into the possibilities of the universe. If we look in this direction, a la Audre Lorde, there's the power of being able to expand perception. To expand perception. The word kink is something that is simply the idea of doing actions or interactions that are outside of what society perceives of as normal. But the pure percentage of people, if you list all the things that are kinky, right? If you come up with the activity you brought up, rope, but this could be everything from dirty talking to having orgies to folks engaging in dominance and submission, having done all the work involving things like, oh, are we just repeating tropes of cultural trauma, right? Like, if we are doing all of these categories of stuff, I mean, the sheer array of things out there, I bet most of the people listening do something on the giant list of all things called kinky, right? They have a fetish, they enjoy spanking, they like something that if you said it out loud, some people might blush.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, how many people were exposed to a facet of the lifestyle through 50 Shades of Grey, right? For a lot of people, that was their first, like, what's this? But it didn't scare people away. It became a best-selling book. So it's like, well, okay, so somebody likes this.
Right. And the trick, though, is the word lifestyle, right? The word lifestyle infers that you do this full time. But there are individuals who engage in this thing called kink every once in a while, right? Once a year, you get your freak on, right? Once a year, you get your freak on. And you get a little spicy. Doesn't mean you have to do it as a, quote, lifestyle. There is a difference in kink between being part of a kink community, being part of a culture, having it be a basis for a relationship structure. That is different than engaging in activities, even if they are, if we think of, say, dominance and submission. I'm thinking about that because I have a 3-day intensive coming up at the end of January. And like, if I think about dominance and submission, there's people who are like, you know what? We are consciously choosing that I am going to be your mistress and you are going to be my girl. And this is going to be the dynamic that we have as consenting adults for building our relationship. And there's other people who are like, you know what? Once a month, it's really hot when you crawl across the floor and go down on me because I ordered you to. Both are valid. And going back to energy and magic, both have charge. One is charge based on the we only do it once in a while. If we think of structures out of the OTO, the notion that male on male sexuality creates a powerful charge is based off a Victorian notion that male to male sexuality is the thing that is hyper taboo. And the taboo creates the charge. Right? That once a month thing, that once a year thing. The other is based on the power of having consistency and collaborative workings. It is individuals who do their banishings every single day. It is folks in fairy tradition who do kala every day. And it is the work of the everyday that creates the embedded experience in the breath of the people who are there together, or the person who is doing the work solo to say, I am a person who gives service. It's the act of me as a service person. And suddenly every act of service that you do is an opportunity for building that charge, for charging that battery. And so the two are both things that can get called kink, but some of them are, quote, lifestyle, and some of them are people getting their freak on.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the OTO because one of the things, like, a good friend of mine, maybe it's Lynn, her partner Richard Kaczynski wrote the book Perturabo about Aleister Crowley, and there's a whole section in that book about Crowley's life with another man, and I think that gets glossed over, if not forgotten altogether, in most practices, where people see Crowley as, I mean, he has some views that most people would be like, okay, no, today,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But he was also defying Victorian norms in both his writing and his lifestyle that people could also be like, okay, there we go. You know, he's doing the thing that we're all talking about today, 100, almost 200 years ago. And I think that's very interesting. I mean, books like Orlando by Virginia Woolf, where you have a person who starts as a man and ends as a woman, a person like the picture of Dorian Gray and Oscar Wilde and things like that. It just seems to all be connected in a not necessarily in a subconscious sort of way, like they're trying to express something that's inside of us that needs to come out.
Right. And we did not invent this stuff in the 90s when the Madonna sex book came out.
Right.
Right? We did not invent this in the 90s when the story of O came out. We did not invent this stuff. The activities that get called kink nowadays go back to Mesopotamia, right? Like this stuff is not new. We did not invent this stuff. But what we are doing is looking back at history with a lens that is today's lens. The quote meaning of, like what did Crowley having a male lover do? Like what was the power of it is informed by that time period. It's not informed by where we are today, right? The meaning behind it, the taboo of it,
Mhm.
right, is not informed in the same way. The class differences at play today are slightly different, though at this point actually in the game more tightly aligned with what was happening in the 1900s and the 1800s, right? But so when we look at some of these historical situations, it's really easy to look back and say Abraham Lincoln was gay. Well, Abraham Lincoln traveled with a man who had physical intimacy with him, but we do not know what kind of physical intimacy behind closed doors. We do not know if they were simply two men who were friends that traveled together or something else. But the desire today, right? The desire today is to say, that's a gay man or that's a bisexual man.
Mhm.
We are labeling through today's culture, today's understanding. It's not the same. Words like he was on the DL. No, that the construct of on the DL is very deeply informed by 1970s and 1980s Black men's culture. Like we can't go in and label that thing in the same way. And it's why magical workings and occult workings, when we use technologies from the 1800s, from the 1700s, from 2000 plus years ago, and do the exact same right, it will inherently have a different charge to it because it is informed by our workings, not by the experiences of a priestess of Inanna doing their great works.
Right.
We are informed today by things like running water, right? We are informed today by things like living under oftentimes Christian patriarchal structure. We are informed by different lenses. And so the meaning of our work is different. If you are a priestess of Inanna doing work for Inanna in a city that is held by Inanna's classes of people underneath them, it's a different thing than me living in the United States nowadays leaving offerings to Inanna. that it becomes taboo rather than day-to-day existence. The charge is inherently different. And I think that's one of the things that gets left behind in looking at the occult, in looking at what gets called kink, in looking at what gets called sexuality, because we are looking at it through different lenses of time, different lenses of power, different lenses of understanding.
Right. Now, one of the things that I picked up in the book that I thought was very interesting to be included was the dynamic of how people view the term master slave today. And this was written almost 10 years ago. So 2025 version, have you still seen a shifting away from those terms as far as master slave and things like that out of the community into using other terms that aren't so charged?
So one of the reasons that I say kink is not inherently sex is because that it's a Venn diagram. There are people for whom kink is sexual, that middle piece. But there's people for whom sex is entirely, say, egalitarian. Sex is entirely what you would see in the eros of the movie world, right? And then on the flip side, there are people who pursue things like kink, whether it is power exchange dynamics and conscious authority transfer, like what you're talking about, or people who say do rope bondage, that like any of those things can be non-sexual. They might be how two people choose to interact with each other, but it isn't for them inherently sex charged. The words master slave, which are terms that I used for myself in the mid-90s when I was first exploring, mid to late 90s, first exploring these topics as a white person, exploring the topic with other white folks before I'd done some of the internal investigations, are different than folks having done now the work of realizing, oh shit, we're replicating cultural trauma, right? Actually looking at it rather than saying, oh, that's hot porn, not noting that like just what has happened in reality and is still happening in reality around the world, not just your jerk off material.
Right.
I will always remember Molina Williams, who is a Black woman. Her website is Molina, MOLLENA.com. And her tagline on it is, the hair isn't the only thing that's kinky. Right? Isn't that a great ad? I love it. Molina did a performance when she became International Ms. Leather. And there's this whole, it's like political beauty pageants wrapped up in leather, right? And her performance on stage, she came out in head wraps, right? Linen head wraps around her head, and a linen shirt, and a long yellow skirt, and bare feet, with her hands chained in front of her. And everybody in the room paused, right? The breath contracted. And she came on and she was struggling because this chain coming off of her wrists is pulling her to the left, to the right, back and forth. And then finally she got out of one side of the cuffs and everybody's screaming and clapping. She gets out of the other side of the cuffs, everybody's screaming and clapping. She strips off the head wraps. She strips off the shirt. Underneath it is this big leopard print bra, strips off the skirt, and underneath is latex little kind of sexy, hot. Everybody's cheering, right? The idea of breaking through the oppression, breaking out of trauma of the past. But then she went back to the cuffs and put on one side and the other and held them up over her head. I am a white guy, right? I come from a specific lens that I can only speak from the gifts of the stories and the things that I have seen. But I have seen Melina, who has used that word, slave, for herself as a Black woman, that there is a difference between having a label put on you
Mhm.
than picking up a label and choosing it through the power of yourself.
Okay.
Right? There's a difference between that and saying, I am choosing this. I am opting into using this term in the same way that I can, as a queer person, use, say, the word faggot for myself. But if somebody who is straight uses it at me,
Right.
that is different.
Right.
That is profoundly different. And so for her as a Black woman to use that term is different for me than as a white man labeling somebody else that term. And so I see more of a conscious shift around folks whose ancestral line does not carry the wound of enslavement. I am slowly seeing over the past 20 years more and more folks go, shit, I need to assess whether this is the right term for me. And that's not just words like master and slave. That's also words like daddy and boy. Are we enacting the trauma of pedophilia, right? Or daddy girl, any of that kind of familial terminology as an erotically empowered charge? Are we doing this consciously? And I think consciousness becomes the difference in magical working, not just in erotic workings and erotic living and empowered living, but in magical working. Are we doing this with eyes wide open and understanding what it is that we are doing? I remember being at an OTO ritual at PantheaCon in San Jose. This is 15 years ago, I think, before, back when there was a PantheaCon, back when that convention existed.
Right.
Which was a huge, for folks who haven't been around for that long, or aren't involved in West Coast realities. It was I want to say 3,000 person multi-path magical workings weekend and shopping event and class weekend of people of all kinds of paths, right? You had hoodoo practitioners in the same hotel and convention-y kind of space as you had ceremonial magicians. Right, everybody's doing their work. And I got a chance to go to this ritual that was an open ritual, and they were disentangling Happy, the Egyptian god, from the keeper at the gates, the mystery at the gates. I am not an OTO initiate, but there are multiple Egyptian god names that are wrapped up in this one being. We'll call it a being. And they were doing a work to say that this makes no sense, right? Folks in the 1800s labeling that these three are all faces of this other concept makes no sense. This is a protector of children. Right? This is it's a doorway god, but protect the family hearth, not like a shadow kind of thing, not a do not pass kind of thing. It's one of those no, we're protecting what is inside. So they were doing a rite to disentangle this one auspice to acknowledge the colonization that had happened from English folks looking at Egyptian history and labeling things that they literally did not understand. And seeing somebody or a group of people do that awareness work and say, oh shit, we're Americans perpetuating cultural toxicity upon the histories and realities of a people that are not ours. And yet, even if we work with these spirits, we need to look at who these spirits and or deities actually were / are, depending on how you look at the living experience of gods.
Right.
We need to look at this and go, okay, what are the actual cultural realities? In the same way that when I look at kink, that there is a difference when I do immobilization and sensory constriction as a way for somebody to be able to do what I refer to as neleomancy, the idea of doing divination through the removal of the senses. And going into that neleomancy state is very different for me here in the 20s compared to somebody who, when it was cited in the witch's hammer of witches hanging constrained in leather cages to be able to discern what was happening around them, it's just a different thing. And so, yes, I'm doing kink, while yes, I'm also doing either magical working or divination or occult work, depending on what language you use. Yes, I'm doing both, but we have a different lens. But one of the things I love about things like neleomancy is it's a chance for me when I am talking to someone and they say, I really want to do sensory deprivation. I can then ask in turn, why?
Right. Right.
Right? Why? And if somebody says, oh, because I think it's totally hot, okay, I am setting my brain to the setting hot.
Right.
If somebody says, well, I want to enter into a trance state to be able to see what messages come through from this goddess that I serve, and I go, great, shall we set an altar for her before we begin? Right? Totally different setting.
Right.
Same activity, wrapping somebody up in fabrics or leather or saran wrap or whatever, with my scissors by my side to be able to get you out if there's a breathing issue. But there is a profound difference between those two settings. And yet, if what somebody says it to me is, I really want to do this to open up a gateway to Aphrodite so that Aphrodite can be able to come in and give me messages, I can ask, as this is an offering for Aphrodite, should it have an erotic charge?
Hmm. Okay.
And
Okay.
suddenly, it's not just a sensory deprivation experience. Maybe there's also a vibrator involved that's setting a rhythm to the drum beat that we're also doing during the ritual. And it becomes an erotic ritual. Again, it's that Venn diagram.
Right. Now, and I'm glad you're bringing this all up because it leans into my question about, what should newcomers know and understand? Because I think for a lot of people, they get a book and they're like, this looks cool. I want to incorporate this into what I'm doing. But they don't understand, like you just mentioned, the particulars that go involved with it. Like if you're doing, you know, uh, you're cutting off airflow, you might want to have somebody standing next to you who can cut the tape off.
As a note, I do not recommend airflow work. There are studies that have been coming out over the past couple of years out of things like mixed martial arts that are showing that chokeholds that happened a decade earlier are leading to issues in not just breathing, but brain trauma a decade later. Right? It's not just in the moment. And people being like, well, I'm watching them in the moment to make sure that if they black out, that there's it. We're talking about issues that come up a decade later and or compounded issues from over and over again. So there's a lot of folks in the world at large that are like, oh, breath play, that's a place you can start. Be aware just on the body reality side, coming out of the world of mixed martial arts. And these people are healthier than I am, right? I get how it's hard, it's hot for a lot of folks because literally on a physical level, we are fucking with the blood pressure of the brain, which creates an altered state of consciousness. But know what else also creates an altered state of consciousness? Rhythm.
Dance.
How many magical practices worldwide use rhythm as a tool for being able to go in or a tool for being able to come out and do
And you,
the working?
and you mentioned that in the book, that rhythm and dancing, putting yourself in that trance state in order to build that energy and conduct the whatever ritual you're trying to do. If you're talking to someone who you just meet and they have gone online and they've seen all this stuff, they've read your book, they've gone to FetLife and everything like that, and they're just like, where do I start?
Right. And thank you for re-bringing that forward because I went on a side tangent based on the example that you gave,
Yes.
right? But where do we begin? And my answer is, where have you already been? And if somebody says, well, I close my eyes when I want to be able to meditate, and I go, great. What would it be like if you put on a blindfold while you do your meditation work? It creates a sensory experience that in the world of Dungeons and Dragons would be a +2 to your dice roll.
Shout out to
Right?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. Like it creates an additional possibility for that altered state because you've already set the line down to be able to do the next step of a practice. You've already been practicing this practice. And if somebody says, I love going into a trance state for magical working when I am able to dance around a fire. And I go, great. What would it be like to start with, before you dance, kneeling in front of an altar you have created make your offerings. And then while you're in front of that altar, maybe put on some rope wrapped around your body and make some sort of physical action part of the offering before you then go and dance. Whether anybody at the ecstatic dance ritual knows you're doing it or not, right? Put it under your clothing. These are all opportunities for adding to what you've already done. Instead of feeling like you have to start somewhere you've never been. If this is your first time journey, do not feel like you have to go somewhere that is, quote, extreme.
Right. Right.
There is, as somebody who has been doing this work for approaching 30 years, actually more than that once I think about stuff before I got involved publicly, and certainly before I had the term sacred kink. As somebody who's been doing this work, I have things that are more accessible to my spirit, to my essence, to my workings, and I have things that are less in alignment. And I think that's true for every occult practitioner. For every magical practitioner, there are things that are more accessible to you or more in alignment to you, and ones that are less in alignment to you. Not better or worse. You know, people who look at, say, fairy tradition and go, wow, queer ecstatic workings involving an array of technologies that are not mine. And other folks who look at chaos magic and go, you know what? Carol's work is really great for you, right? You over there. Or you listening. But you think about the idea of off the cuff structural workings where you are doing string, by the seat of your pants magic. It's like, whoa, not mine. And the same thing happens with kink. If there are things that are in alignment with you, why not go there? Right. And there are pieces that for me are that's a thing, this is a thing that we do and we offer, and I'm glad to be part of it. Like, say something, quote, extreme, like hook suspension, for me is simply another technology. But if somebody says, oh, we're going to have a cuddle party where clothing stays on and we offer sensual touch to be able to tap into our altered states of consciousness and be able to offer all of the charge of this cuddling as a way to be able to do X, Y, and Z, whatever that means to you. I look at that and go, y'all have fun, right? Not in alignment for me. And I know folks who look at hook suspensions and go, oh my God, maybe if I build up my whole life, it'll be this transformative thing. And I look at it and go, cool, it's a thing we're doing. In the same way, I know folks who are ceremonial magicians who run rituals and they're just like, okay, what's the tech of it? Do we have all the flowers? Have we set up the altar to be exactly the right size? Is the priestess ready to strip down? It's just tech for them. But for someone else in attendance at the ritual, it is mind-blowing and spirit-blowing. But for that technician, it's just the tech. And for me, hook suspension is often that way. It's just the tech.
Right. Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on that I thought that would be important is, what are some of the misconceptions regarding sacred kink and sexuality and magic you'd want to dispel? Because I would imagine someone coming up to this video, this podcast, will be like, okay, well, my whoever has been telling me that they want to do this stuff, should I let them? Is what I when I refer to is, should a how should a person safely enter this practice and not be subject to manipulation, abuse, and things like that? It's not just because someone wants to do it doesn't mean you should do it. And am I under? And hopefully I'm not jumbling what I mean there.
Let's give it a try and see if I understand it. One of the tools I cannot recommend enough in general with occult practices and being part of groups, and this applies to kink as well, is Isaac Bonowitz, the former head for the American Druidic Foundation, wrote a tool called the ABCDEF for use by the FBI and CIA, mostly FBI. which was the Advanced Bonowitz Cult Detection Evaluation Frame. Look up Bonowitz, Bonewitz, and the ABCDEF. What he built was a Likert scale, I think it's a 1 to 10, can't remember, that has something like 20 questions of, is this an unhealthy cult? / is this simply a cultist of some sort? / should I have awareness about it? And some of the questions are, makes you give up your original name and or self-identity, or says you cannot have connections from any part of your past, or has to have sex with the leader of the group to gain status or levels of initiation and knowledge, right? It's questions like this. Please check it out. It is an amazing tool. The next thing I think about with how do we do this quote safely is to understand our perceptions of safety and risk. To simply look at it in your life. What does it mean to be safe? Because if your belief is that doing altered states of consciousness in general through, say, musical workings, right, and entering things through music, if that's okay, but doing it through spanking is not, both are rhythm-based practices. What's the difference for you? Why are these differences present in your perception? Right. And if the answer is, well, one is naughty and one is not, why is naughty holding power over you? What about this is problematic? Or what about this is, quote, unsafe? Now, if the answer is, I know that if I do that kind of trance working, I'm going to fall in love with whoever does the thing. And I know that if I fall in love, I'm going to do things that are not healthy for my life at large. What powerful self-knowledge, right? What powerful self-knowledge. And for me, there's a similar alignment with doing stuff under the Harit or under the vampiric cultist practices, that if I do those kinds of workings, a la Michel Ballinger, and that take an understanding of the occult, I know I dive deeper and I need to have people around me, and individuals, will go with individuals because of vampiric perception. I'm going to have individuals around me that I need to trust to catch me, that I need to trust to do ritual work with me. Because I dive in deeper / differently. And trust is what is needed for this to be, quote, safer. So if people say, I want to have this be a safer practice, I want this to be a healthy practice, what is needed for healthy practices in the rest of your explorations of magic, the occult, and life at large? And if the answer is, I only do magic with people who I have long-standing friendships with, why aren't you doing that with your sacred kink working?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do these technologies transfer? Does this understanding of self transfer? In which case that exact situation would be, I'm going to do this work with people that I've known for a long time, that are friends. Great. Build friendships with somebody who could then say, cool, you want to do what? Have your hands bound in front of you while your eyes are blindfolded, and you get to do breath and listen to music and dive into your inner sense of self. Wow. That's beautiful. And then you have this person who you trust, who is a friend, who is there to be a spotter or guide. But if what your answer is that actually what helps you dive into magical workings more powerfully is to do things with people who have expertise, whether I know them or not, that's a different guidance towards how you do this work and who you do this work with.
Right. Right. And we should always remember that consent is very important. That anything you don't want to do, you don't have to do.
Well, I'm going to offer there that consent is a complex topic, right? For some people, consent is sitting down with a survey form of some sort and checklisting, let's do this, not do this, and to do it not just the ones that are available for kink, but to also think about that practice for other situations. For example, my partner, my spouse, is devoutly Jewish. And we have an agreement that we do not in scenes do anything where they have to lay their belly on the ground and do prayer poses, because they reserve that for God. Right? And so that's not on the standard checklist. That is a topic of the sacred and the spiritual. So to think as well about consent and this. But for other people, it's let's do this, but to understand that sometimes our answers might shift. But that sets up all parties for the potential for a consent violation, or more accurately, accident. Gotcha. Right? Where everybody's like, well, I didn't mean to actually cross the line, even though I verbally said it. That's risky. And that applies not just in sacred kink, but in spiritual practices at large. If any of you are in mystery traditions of any sort, where during initiation, quote, stuff will happen, and you're consenting by walking into the ritual that stuff will happen, but you trust the people enough who are part of your coven or your circle or whatever it might be, that you go, okay, I'm gonna trust. You're setting yourself up for the potential for emotional, physical, or energetic harm. And yet, people choose to be in mystery traditions. And for some people, a small percentage that I meet, sacred kink is part of mystery traditions. I think of Blue Star Wicca, or actually a lot of Wiccan traditions, incorporating flogging as part of their magical workings. That's technically a form of sacred kink, but it's done through the agreement that our group uses this technology. And if you're showing up in the group, you are consenting.
Okay.
So I would argue that consent, when it comes to magic, when it comes to the occult, is a complex topic that needs discussed not just in sacred kink circles, but needs discussed in all of these other spaces as well. Where does consent apply? And where are mystery traditions part of complex consent?
Gotcha. Well, Lee, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If anyone would like to follow you, where's the best way to do that?
If you type in passion and soul, whether it's .com, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, all of these different platforms, you can find me under that handle. And I just love getting to connect with people. You can find my upcoming events on my website. And I also have a Patreon, so patreon.com/passion and soul, where every week I post different resources. And if you join, at the mid-level or higher, you have the ability to get the entirety of the audiobook for Sacred Kink as part of that membership.
Excellent. We'll make sure to put all of those links in the description below. Once again, Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Casting circles beneath the midnight sky, incantations neath the shadows fly, summoning secrets, embracing the darkness.